I was placing the last bowl of salad on the table when it happened. No big moment, no drama, just a sentence tossed out like a used napkin. "She's the help, right?" "The salad lady." It came from Brielle, my daughter-in-law. She said it under her breath, but loud enough for the woman beside her to hear. Loud enough for me to hear. The guest gave a tight little laugh, the kind you give when you're not sure if you're supposed to laugh or correct someone. I didn't say a word. Just straightened the bowl slightly and stepped back. Nobody else at the table looked up. Not my son Brian, who was too busy pouring wine. Not my granddaughter, who was already glued to her iPad. Not even Miles, my late husband's brother, who always claimed he could read a room like a book. This one. He didn't even glance up from his plate. I stood there for another second, maybe two, waiting for someone to say something, to correct her, to clear their throat, to acknowledge me as anything other than the woman who brought the romaine. Nothing. So I did what I've learned to do after 58 years of smoothing over moments like that. I smiled, walked back to the kitchen, picked up the last dish from the counter, and when I heard Brielle laughing again, this time louder, I reminded myself of something I had written down 3 months ago in the corner of an old recipe book. They think you're just the help. So help yourself to everything they think you don't see. I hadn't meant it as a real plan, not back then. It was just something I scribbled after a long night and an even longer silence at the dinner table. But that night, hearing her call me the help like it was my name, something shifted, not snapped, just tilted, like the ground under my feet had always been at a slant, but I'd finally stopped pretending it was level. I stood at the kitchen island and watched them through the pass-through window, the way they moved, the way Brielle flicked her hair and waved her hand like she'd been born into comfort, the way my own son didn't flinch. And in that moment, I realized something else. If I could be invisible in my own family, I could do anything, and no one would see it coming. The house used to be mine. Not just legally, though. Yes, my name was still on the deed back when we bought it with the life insurance after my husband died. But emotionally, spiritually, it had been my anchor. Now it was Brielle's domain. Her throw pillows, her diffuser in the entryway, her meal plans taped on the fridge like commandments. She'd moved in 2 years ago after she and Brian got married. At first, it was supposed to be temporary just until they found a place of their own. But then the market changed, and temporary became permanent in that slow, creeping way mildew does. You don't notice until it's everywhere. At first, I tried to accommodate. I gave them the master bedroom. I moved into the old guest room downstairs. I told myself I didn't need much. She started redoing everything, the curtains, the cutlery, even the garden layout I had kept since the boys were little. She replaced the perennials with gravel and low-maintenance succulents. "It's cleaner," she said, as if history was messy. Brian never objected, not once. I told myself it was just growing pains, adjustments, family evolving. But then came the subtle shifts. Mail addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Bryant Foster, only no mention of me. Phone calls I wasn't looped in on. Holiday plans I only learned about when they posted photos from Maui. I became the live-in grandmother who watched their kid after school, folded their towels, and apparently made their salad. When I mentioned going to visit my cousin in Vermont for a week, Brielle blinked and said, "That's fine. We'll just need to figure out childcare." Not, "We'll miss you." Not, "You deserve a break." Just logistics. I smiled, nodded, and said nothing. But that night in my small room, with the thin sheets and the lamp she said didn't fit the vibe, I opened my laptop and started something I hadn't touched in years. My late husband's old project folder, the one marked Crescent Pines Resort, bid archive. He'd nearly bought it once, back in the 90s, a lakeside getaway 3 hours north. It hadn't worked out then. Timing, money, something. But looking at it now, I saw something different. An opportunity. A place they'd never expect. I stared at the photos of the cabins, the dock, the great hall with the fireplace, and I smiled. Because maybe I couldn't take back my home, but I could choose the next one. And this time, I wouldn't be invisible. I remember the first time Madison corrected me in front of the grandchildren. I was handing Lily a second helping of mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet refill, and Madison reached over, plucked the spoon from my hand, and said, "Too many carbs, sweetie." Grandma forgets. She laughed like it was harmless, like I hadn't raised 2 boys on meatloaf and math homework and the kind of prayers that only made sense when you whispered them in the kitchen at midnight. Aaron didn't say a word, just kept carving the turkey. At first, I thought I was imagining it, that slow shift from family to background noise. Madison was polite always with a smile, but somehow everything I did became extra. If I offered to help, she already had a plan. If I brought a dish, it stayed on the counter. When I asked what I could contribute, she'd say, "Nothing, really. Just enjoy." But enjoying meant standing on the edge of every room watching the holiday I once hosted unfold without me. At Lily's dance recital, they saved me a seat in the 4th row while Aaron and Madison sat in the front, flanked by her parents. I watched my granddaughter pirouette across the stage and couldn't shake the feeling I'd been relegated to the overflow section of my own life. Still I smiled. Still I clapped. Still I offered to take pictures after the show. That's the thing about slow erasure. It never starts with shouting. It starts with the quiet reassignment of your worth. Then came the summer trip to Pine Brook Resort. It used to be our tradition, mine and Aaron's. A modest cabin shared meals hikes in the cool morning air. When Madison suggested they upgrade the experience, I didn't protest. She booked the waterfront villa, added catered meals, daily yoga, even a private chef for one evening. I paid for my share as always. When we arrived, Madison breezed through check-in while I waited for the extra room key, like an afterthought. She turned to me with that hostess smile and said, "Oh, we assumed you'd be in the smaller guest room. It's just easier with the kids needing the big suite." She said it sweetly, as if I'd requested to be tucked away. By the 3rd day, I wasn't even part of the schedule. They went kayaking while I reorganized the fridge. Madison handed me a grocery list before they left, calling over her shoulder, "If you're heading into town anyway." And I heard it then. The thing I hadn't wanted to admit. I wasn't their guest. I wasn't even the matriarch. I was the help. That night, as I brought the salad to the table, Madison was pouring wine and laughing at something Aaron had said. I heard her whisper, half joking, "Honestly, it's like having a live-in Airbnb host." No one corrected her, not even my son. I didn't drop the bowl. I didn't cry. I just sat down quietly, like someone who finally realized she hadn't been seated at the table for years. 3 months ago, I stood in a lawyer's office just outside Charleston, pen in hand, eyes steady. Across the table sat a man in a linen suit who never once asked for my last name. On the paperwork it read, Marilyn Ashcroft. I hadn't used it in decades, but it felt right, like a quiet reset no one else got to vote on. The resort Blue Haven had been struggling for a while, a combination of poor management, out-of-date infrastructure, and a pandemic debt load no one fully recovered from. I'd overheard a conversation in the kitchen during a catering event. Staff whispering about payroll delays, repairs, postponed layoffs, looming. I didn't say anything that night. I just drove home in silence. And the next day, I called my lawyer. I used the exit capital from my catering business, the one no one in my family ever talked about, to purchase majority ownership. The holding company was clean, quiet. No Whitmore signatures, just mine. Now the nameplate on the corner office read, Ashcroft Hospitality Holdings, and the general manager, Teresa, texted me every Friday with a status report. "Are you sure they won't figure it out?" she asked one afternoon while we reviewed updated guest protocols. "They never asked what I do," I said. "Why start now?" Back in the present, the Whitmores had settled into their usual rhythm, demanding dismissive, blind to anything outside themselves. At breakfast, my daughter-in-law Sierra frowned when the avocado wasn't ripe enough. My son, Luke, asked a waitress to refill that for my mom, pointing at me. The girl hesitated, looked confused, then poured the coffee anyway. I smiled, said thank you, and excused myself. That night, Sierra wore white linen and diamond studs to dinner. She hadn't helped plan it, hadn't lifted a finger, but she walked in like she owned the place. I arrived with the salad, just helping the staff because it was second nature. Sierra turned as I laid it down. "The help doesn't eat with family," she said loud enough for the whole table to hear. No one corrected her. Luke looked away. A few cousins snickered. I didn't respond. Not then. Because tomorrow night was the gala, and my name wasn't on the invite, but it was on the deed. The ballroom at Blue Heron Springs shimmered under soft gold chandeliers. The family banquet had been scheduled months ago. Sierra's idea pitched as a gathering to celebrate legacy. Funny, they never asked what mine was. I arrived just before the doors closed. My dress was simple black, tailored the same shade I wore to Luke's graduation. Not loud, but hard to ignore. No one looked twice as I entered. To them, I was still background, still convenient silence. A waiter intercepted me near the back of the room. "Ma'am," he said gently, "the staff table is just along the wall." I blinked. "Is that where I'm expected to sit?" He hesitated. "That's what I was told." Before I could answer, the microphone cracked at the front of the room. Teresa, the general manager, stepped up to the podium. Her voice rang clear and sure. "If I may interrupt for just a moment," she said, smiling. "Before we begin tonight's dinner, Blue Heron Springs would like to recognize a change in leadership. As of this season, we have a new principal owner. Chatter dimmed. She's a long-standing member of this community, a woman of vision, generosity, and quiet strength. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Marilyn Ashcroft." Silence. Then glass shattered. Sierra had dropped her wine glass. Haley froze mid-sentence. Daniel looked like someone had unplugged him from the wall. I walked forward, slowly, past the table they'd placed me near, past the waitstaff, past every name that had once dismissed mine. Teresa stepped aside. I took the mic. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," I began. My voice was low, calm, but the room held its breath. "I'm here to clarify something." I looked directly at Sierra. "You once said the help doesn't eat with family." I paused. "Well, this table, it's mine, and everyone eats with respect." I handed the mic back and walked to the head of the table. Sierra didn't move. Luke looked like he wanted to disappear. I pulled out the chair at the center, the one they hadn't set for me, and I sat. The staff began serving. The music resumed. But the room had changed. I didn't need an invitation, because I'd built the table myself. The morning after the banquet, a new energy filled the air at Blue Heron Springs. Not loud, not boastful, just balanced. The staff moved with purpose posture a little straighter. Some smiled when they saw me. Others just nodded, but there was a quiet respect between us now. I'd earned that the hard way, not with titles, but with consistency. Daniel and Haley didn't come down for breakfast. By mid-morning, Teresa approached me, tablet in hand. "They've missed 2 payment deadlines," she said quietly. "The system flagged their suite this morning. Have they said anything I asked?" "Only that they assumed it was comped." "Because of you." "Of course." "Policy is policy," I said. "Apply the standard room reallocation notice. And let housekeeping know." That afternoon, I passed Haley in the corridor near the spa. She had sunglasses on indoors, a designer wrap draped dramatically over one shoulder. She didn't smile, didn't greet me. Just hissed, "You're really doing this?" I didn't pause. "I'm applying policy? That's all." "We're family," she snapped. I turned fully to face her. Calm, not cruel. "Then perhaps you should have treated me like it." She didn't respond, just stormed off, heels clacking on the tile like a warning no one was listening to anymore. Later, I sat down with Teresa and the housekeeping leads. We reviewed new benefits packages, health stipends, guaranteed weekends off in rotation. I asked their thoughts not out of formality, but because I needed to know what mattered to them. Not one person mentioned room upgrades or special access. Just respect. Just stability. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration. Years ago, I gave and gave so much that I forgot I could say no. I said yes to babysitting last minute. Yes to funding vacations I was never invited on. Yes to silence when I should have spoken. Now I said yes to fairness, to structure, to the staff who made this place breathe, and to myself. As evening settled, I walked past the luxury suite once held by my son and his wife. It was quiet now, linens, freshly changed view of the lake untouched. Their new room was comfortable but equal, like everyone else. And that, more than anything, was the message. At Blue Heron Springs, respect wasn't inherited. It was earned, even by family. The embroidery arrived just before noon. Stacked neatly in tissue-lined boxes were sets of new linen napkins monogrammed in soft gray thread. Not flashy, not loud, just right. Ashcroft Collection, the vendor had called it. It made me pause. I hadn't used my maiden name in decades, not in any serious capacity. But when the purchase went through and they asked for a legal signature on the controlling interest, I signed it, Marilyn Ruth Ashcroft. I remember hesitating, then writing the name all the way out. No initials. No shortcuts. Just the full truth. That name belonged to a woman who once worked 2 jobs, one of them cleaning rooms at a mountain lodge not unlike this one. My mother never complained, but she never sat at the tables either. Now, her name lined the tables. That afternoon, I met with Ethan and the head of design to finalize the renovation plans. Nothing drastic, just updates the staff had asked for over the years and never received: safer walkways, quieter HVAC units, better lighting along the garden path. At the end of the meeting, I brought out a folder. "I'd like to establish a foundation," I said, "for the children of hospitality workers. Tuition support, mentoring, the works. I want it named after her." Ethan leaned forward. "Your mother?" I nodded. "Eleanor Ashcroft. She never got past 9th grade, but she showed up every single day." By early evening, the lobby was quiet, except for the soft murmur of piano music. I watched as a maintenance worker walked past a couple folding towels. He caught my eye and said with quiet certainty, "Good evening, Ms. Ashcroft." No title had ever sounded more earned. Later that night, guests gathered for the final welcome dinner. The long table was beautifully set, Ashcroft linens included. Candlelight glowed off wine glasses. Voices echoed across the wooden beams overhead. Daniel and Haley sat stiffly at one end, not quite part of the conversation. A few people tried to chat with them. Others didn't bother. At the head of the table, I rose. "I won't take much of your time," I began. "I just wanted to thank you for being here, for helping this place grow into something better. This resort's future is built on care and clarity." I gestured toward the new plaque mounted that afternoon on the lobby wall behind the front desk. The room turned to look. In brushed brass, the words read, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you lift while you're here. Marilyn Ashcroft Foundation." I didn't wait for applause, just raised my glass. "To the people who make this place run seen and unseen. This is your home too." They clinked glasses, and this time, the sound rang real. The morning air was clean touched with pine and salt. I walked slowly along the stone path that curved past cabin 3. No clipboard, no schedule, just a small overnight bag in one hand and my car keys in the other. Inside, I caught a glimpse of movement suitcases. Hasty packing voices clipped with irritation. Haley pulled back the curtain for a second, eyes sharp and scanning. She saw me. I kept walking. I didn't slow, didn't smile, didn't offer even the courtesy of a nod. Some goodbyes don't need to be spoken, especially when the silence already says everything. At the front desk, Ethan was finishing a morning huddle with staff. He saw me and offered a small, respectful smile. I slid an envelope across the counter. No name on the front, just room 3 written in simple pen. Inside, one handwritten note. "Please waive the final cleaning fee for room 3. Consider it a thank you for teaching me who I never want to become." I didn't wait for a response. I stepped outside, the sun still low over the lake. My car waited at the edge of the gravel lot, dew clinging to the windshield. I placed the bag in the passenger seat, slid behind the wheel, and rolled the windows down. No music. Just the soft hush of water lapping against the dock, the quiet rustle of pine needles. Overhead, and the steady breath of someone who had finally stopped trying to earn her place. There was no applause, no grand farewell. Only this, a road that didn't require permission to follow, and a name, my name, etched not in someone else's story, but in stone linen, and the memory of everyone who had once mistaken me for someone small. I pulled out slowly, turned once at the bend, and looked back, not at them, at the lodge, at what I had built. Then I drove forward, and this time, no one called me back.